welcome to the podcast, Wait, What Do You Do Again? Where we talk to everyday people doing amazing things. I'm your host, Megan DeFord. Let's go. Today's guest is the lovely Louise Curran, Feng Shui expert and consultant who lives in Surrey, England. Feng Shui really had a moment, I would say about 3 or 4 decades ago, the same time as that global village coffee house aesthetic. Trading spaces on TLC was big. Enya and Gregorian chant was playing on the radio, and we were sort of exposed to this 50,000 foot view of Feng Shui. And as I was talking to Louise, I couldn't help but think about my conversation with Terry McTighe and how she was talking about we are the environment. We are not part of the environment. We are the environment. We are nature. And as I was talking with Louise, and I hope that you hear today, that follows through in terms of how Feng Shui works. I hope that you stay curious and open. It is an interesting conversation. I learned so much, and I hope that you enjoy. Louise, thank you so much for being here today. I am really, really excited for us to talk. You are a Feng Shui consultant. First of all, am I saying Feng Shui correctly?
Yes,
Okay.
you are. Yes.
Excellent. And you're a Feng Shui consultant, and I want to know everything about that. I think, I'm based in the United States right now, and I feel like Feng Shui had like a moment in the early 2000s here. And so there might be some misconceptions of what it actually is. Can you talk a little bit about what actually is Feng Shui?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually it's over 4,000 years old. And it's a Chinese practice that basically looks at the energy within your home and creating a sanctuary within your space that really supports you. And that can include the furniture movement, which I think most people have kind of heard, oh, maybe I should have my sofa here or my bed here. But it also includes so much more than that. So I actually trained in classical Feng Shui as well as intentional. There are many forms of Feng Shui, but classical is the original. And that kind of works at mapping your home. It's quite scientific. They call it a Bagua map, and then that works out kind of what's happening within your home. You could be going into a money lock. It could be that your home's really good for people and relationships, but maybe challenging on the money side. So classical Feng Shui works on a very holistic point of view. And then you also have intentional Feng Shui, which is really like law of attraction. And it's having things intentionally in your space that are going to help you to get to your goals or to how you really want to feel within your space so that it is a sanctuary. Because we spend so much time in our homes. It's probably about 80%, especially if we're working from home now. And you really do need your space to support you. And so many people don't actually have that. So many people, when one of the first things I'll often say to people is, imagine you're at your home, go to your front door, close your eyes, how do you feel? And so many people will say, oh, I feel a bit apprehensive, or I'm dreading what I'm going to walk into. And, this is the place that you sleep. It's where you eat. It's where you might bring up your children if you have children. So many really important life moments happen in your home. And it's so much better when your home is actually supporting you at the same time. Hopefully that kind of answers it, but it's vast with Feng Shui.
Yeah, I didn't realize there were so many different types. And one of the things that you spoke about just now with the intentional Feng Shui, and I'm excited to learn more about that, is that idea of being very intentional with your home. And something that I started a few years ago, and it might sound silly to people, but once a month, I thank my home for being my home. And I'm like, thank you for keeping us safe. Thank you for being the right size. Thank you for being welcoming and welcoming friends. And I know it sounds sort of silly or woo-woo to people, but to me, it almost is like another family member, right? We do spend so much time there. And I am so grateful that not only we have a place to be that's safe, I don't know, it helps connect me a little bit more to that space than just, more functional. And I'm really fascinated by both parts of it. How did you get into Feng Shui?
Yeah, it was quite a journey actually. And when I've spoken to quite a few people, they kind of tend to say this. I suppose my first feeling with being in a home was I had a real stark difference between my grandma, her home. She was actually a hoarder, nothing dirty, but she would hoard furniture. Some rooms you couldn't walk in because they were stacked and, chairs stacked on tables. And so I had my grandma's house that was like that. And then my auntie's house was like walking into a magazine. It was beautiful. And I just remember being really aware of how I felt in those two spaces and how differently. And this was from a really young age. And I obviously I love them both. They're amazing people, but it's what happens in your life. And then my mum bought me a book on Feng Shui when I was, I don't know, probably about 11. I must have shown some interest in spaces at that point. It didn't really go into too much depth, but I remember I would go round to my family and say, you've got to put the toilet lid down because that's good Feng Shui. So I was kind of picking up these little bits and kind of understanding maybe parts of energy before really understanding what that was. And then life just happened. I went into lots of different careers. I've been in marketing and PR. I did a bit of fashion design, all sorts of different bits and pieces. But people would always ask me for advice within their home. What should I do here or what should I do there? So I did a bit of, I trained in interior design as well, which was lovely, but it wasn't really fulfilling this need to help people on a more kind of soul level, I suppose. So I kind of found my way back into Feng Shui during COVID. I think everyone was searching for a bit more connection at that point. And for me, I'm very glad that it sent me in that direction because it feels now like I'm doing the things that I was supposed to be doing and helping people to live a more harmonious life. And for me, with Feng Shui, it's very much about your environment, so your outer Feng Shui, but it's also your inner Feng Shui as well, and having harmony and balance within yourself as well. And that's kind of what I do within my work, is to try and work on both sides, because if one isn't working with the other, then you're never going to find that harmony. And that's kind of where humans really want to be. If we take it back to nature, it's all about balance and harmony, and it's working with the seasons, and I try and bring that in as well, because I think that's really important with Feng Shui, because everything everywhere is energy. The whole universe is just a massive moving energy, and nothing's even solid, which is mind-blowing, because this desk that I'm sat at feels very solid to me,
right?
As that chair is that you're sitting on. But everything is moving at such a fast rate that we won't actually know that. But if everything is moving, if everything's a massive energy, it's creating energy and it's creating vibration. So your whole home and environment and everything around you, even what you're putting out into the world, is energy. It is a vibration. And so having a bit of control over that and being able to, make certain spaces in certain energies within your home sometimes will start to go down a negative route depending on what's kind of happening. And you can have some control over how that feels. You can put remedies in place which would stop that becoming a negative energy, so that your home is really supportive. And it's funny, when I go into, you can kind of tell when someone's got some good Feng Shui in their home, because people will come into your space and they won't say, "Oh, you've had Feng Shui," but they'll say, "Oh, I just feel really comfortable here," or they'll fall asleep. So I have that quite a lot with my space. When people come into their home, we're all there, we're having fun, we're having drinks, and suddenly you look over and they've just nodded off on the sofa. And it's just because there's such a relaxed, balanced atmosphere that there's safety. So yeah, so it's really interesting when you go into different spaces, and you might find that when you're traveling around
Yes.
for your work.
Yeah. And it's as you were talking about energy, and for anyone who's listening that's like, I don't know, or skeptical or something like that, I think we've all experienced exactly what you said, where you walked into a space and you're like, oh, this feels great, or you're energized, or you're like, I want to get out of here. There's
Yeah.
everybody has had that experience. And in terms, I'm a big believer in energy that we put out into the universe, and what we draw back in. And we can all do it. You can change a conversation very quickly, based on how you act and what energy you're putting out. You don't actually have to do, I think most people have experienced that. You don't have to do that much with your body, but you can change your energy to get people up and excited, to shut things down. And so I'm a huge believer in this. I don't understand a lot of it, but I'm a huge believer in it. And I think we're experiencing it all the time, around us. So I would imagine that whether it's your personal home or your office, you want to have a certain vibe, right? Like I would imagine your
Mm.
dining room is going to feel different than your bedroom, or your kids' playroom is going to be different than your office. So that all makes so much sense to me. So when people come to you and ask you for, your expertise on this, how much do they know? Like, how much do they know about what's going on in their space? Do they just kind of feel like the vibe's off? Have they never tried it before? Like, what do you find when people are coming to you the first time?
So there's a few different things that might come up. I think often people don't realise that maybe something's off in their actual space, but they might suddenly find that um, their relationship's fallen apart,
Mm.
or they're having trouble with family members, or um, money's a challenge. So they might feel like money's coming in, but it's dripping out, and they're getting loads of bills coming in, or something like that. So often there's something happening in their life
Mm.
that brings them to me. I think with some feng shui experts, it might be that, and with some people are more just a bit more in tune and a bit more intuitive, so they might feel like something's off in their space. But generally, for me, what I've found is that there's something in a life area that has
Mm.
been a bit of a challenge, and I'll always do kind of a questionnaire consultation and have a chat with people and kind of ask those key areas. So within feng shui, there's 9 key areas. It's like your career, it's your abundance, it's your love and relationships. It might be family, and then ask questions within those sectors to try and help people to work out where they might be finding that they're having a challenge. I've got a service as well that dives into that a bit more, like a wheel of life, so that it helps someone, because I think it's really hard sometimes to kind of, how often do people really sit back and analyze how their life's really going? There might be one thing that sticks out, like your career. You might think, oh, I'm not getting anywhere, I really want that. But then not many people I've found really look through all sectors, that wheel of life, and kind of dissect, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm five here, and I'm an 8 out of 10 here, but I'm a 4 out of 10 here, and maybe there's a few areas that need, some support. So that's what I've tried to do, is try and help people, and I would see that as a sort of like your inner feng shui as well. So trying to work with yourself. What do you really need, rather than what do you think everyone out there needs from you? What do you think your home needs from you? What do you need? And we'll work from that spot. And then often everything will be in balance. And then that puts other life areas back into balance once you've worked out your challenge areas.
That's so interesting. I wouldn't expect that that's how you start, but it makes total sense that that's where you start from. And the idea of, sort of put your air mask on first so you can help other people. That's a really that's interesting. So, people come to you, you do the assessment, and then what happens from there?
So it really depends. And this is different for different feng shui consultants, but from my perspective, there's a couple of services. So what I like to do is kind of get to know that person, have the consultation, do the questionnaire, and then it's a decision as to what that person really needs. So it might be that they just want to do the wheel of life and kind of understand where they're sitting, and then maybe go away for a while and see how they feel about things and come back. Or they might want to delve further into it. So we'll look at at what they can put into their space intentionally, because that's really powerful. And then we would look at the classical feng shui as well. And I see it as a real journey. So there's a lot of information that can come back to you. So we'll have the chat. I'll come in. I'll look at the space. I'll put a report together. And that report can be quite chunky. If I'm really honest, there's a lot of information. So then what I like to do is invite people to go on a bit of a journey. So it could be, say, 3 months worth of calls where we'll sit down and we'll go through certain parts, and I'll kind of advise as to what are the first things I would suggest were changed or remedied. And then with the next month, we'll go on to the next part. Okay, let's change these bits. Or it can be up to 6 months. So it really depends what that person needs, the kind of support they need. Some people are super alpha. They get the report and they're just like, boom, I've done it. I've done everything. I'm 100%. And other people are busy, and, it's not as easy to kind of drop everything and just get all the remedies in place. So I like to kind of see it as a journey and work with people. And I think at that point as well, you tend to uncover a little bit more as well. There is a trust element as well with feng shui. You're allowing someone into your sanctuary to kind of advise on your life. That's massive. So I think as the journey progresses, then you can kind of uncover certain things that will help even more, which is actually a really lovely thing. And I know you're going to ask me this later, but it's probably one of the parts that I love the most, is like really connecting and helping people. That's what brings me all of the joy. And then when they put a certain remedy in place and come back to me and say, oh my God, this has happened. And it's lovely to see people really flourish.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's, as you're describing it, I'm like, you're sort of like an energy therapist, right? Like you're diagnosing what's really going on, like a sanctuary, so you can have a sanctuary for your sanctuary of like yourself. And so you talked a little bit before about energy and, a law of attraction and really sort of quantum physics. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how Feng Shui approaches that?
Yeah, of course. So obviously with quantum physics, that's basically the proven scientific fact that everything is moving massive energy.
Right.
So, and that wasn't the case 4,000 years ago. there wasn't that scientific proof. Obviously, it's way more recent. But it's the intuitiveness of the people of that time. They were very in touch. We as a society have become less and less connected to nature, to ourselves. So, 4,000 years ago, this wouldn't have felt woo-woo.
Yeah, right.
Whereas what's so strange is that now it feels woo-woo, even though we have science kind of proving certain parts of it.
Yes.
So the scientific part is that everything is energy. So, and that if something is creating energy, it's creating vibration. And there is then an energy in the space. We can't see it, but we know it's there because there's radio waves. You and I are talking across thousands of miles.
The Atlantic Ocean, yes.
The Atlantic Ocean. We can't see it, but we know it's happening. And so there is an element of trust within it as well. But intuitively, you can tell. You can tell because we've all walked into a room where you could cut the atmosphere with a it's so tangible. It's so tangible. So with everything being a massive moving energy, there are certain things that you can put in place. Maybe imagine it a bit like a electric circuit, back at school when we're putting all these bits together. If you put certain things in place, and Feng Shui definitely works with nature for that. So you're putting a natural element in place to balance that space. And that's kind of how I would try and explain Feng Shui in a way that's understandable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that natural element has its own vibration, and by putting that vibration into a space that requires a remedy of that kind, you're changing the vibration in that space back to something that's balanced and harmonious.
Yeah. And, we had talked about this previously as well. It's interesting that element has a natural vibration and energy, but then you're seeing the element and you're now interacting with that. And I always tell people when I talk about this sort of stuff, like, well, what's the worst that happens, right? Like, if this isn't real, if it's something you don't believe in and you do it, you're really just guiding your thoughts, right? It's almost like a reminder of, oh, I want, talk about money. Like, I want to bring in more wealth or whatever it is. And you have an element, and now you're reminded of that every day, and it's something that is physically in front of you. That's drawing your attention. If I can see some people probably being like, oh, I don't know, how does it really do it? But I'm always like, so what's wrong with that, right? Give it a try and see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what are the elements that typically you'll bring in for this type of Feng Shui?
Okay, so within classical Feng Shui, so intentional is a bit more about what you were saying there, where it's what you see, it's what's in front of you, is what you manifest in a way, which is extremely powerful. The classical Feng Shui, it is those natural elements. There are different ways that you can bring them in. So even shapes of furniture can be a certain way of bringing an element in. It can be colors, it can be artwork, but the really powerful one is the real element. So there's water. So having a fish tank in a certain place in your house, once you've done the numbers. So what I would say is you absolutely need to have the classical Feng Shui Bagua map done for your home to really understand where these natural elements need to go. The intentional you can do without that. That can be more intuitive. So there's water, there's earth, so that could be crystals, rocks, but again, it can be shapes of furniture, it can be artwork. There is wood, which is plants. Live plants in your home is so amazing because they are live, fresh, renewable energy. There's metal as well. So there's the 5 elements, earth, water, fire, metal, and why have I had a mind blank?
What? Did you say what?
Wood. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Nice.
Wood. Yeah.
No plastic?
Perimenopausal right now.
Oh my gosh. That's like a whole other podcast. I know, I hear you. Do you have any thoughts about how, I don't know the right way to say this, but how manufactured or unnaturally manufactured some of the products we bring into our house are?
Yeah, I think that we have to remember that we are in a modern world. There are certain things that do make life slightly easier. So in certain places, plastics, it does make your life simpler. And to have, if you were to have all wooden boxes through your house, it would be a very expensive thing to do. So in some ways, it's helpful. In others, where you can have as many natural elements as possible, it's really good. Something that we try and kind of guard people against is to have too much faux plants and, dried plants even, because they're not bringing in that fresh, renewed energy. And what you're looking for to do within your space is to bring that energy in, because that's kind of new opportunities at the same time. You want to see it, So bringing in that fresh energy is bringing in new opportunities. And if you're putting a faux plant in that space, you're missing out on having that piece of energy, which I realise is a very, it's not always that simple. I have a lot of people saying to me, oh, I kill plants. Plants don't survive in my house. How can I do it? And my advice in those instances is try and change your mindset around it, your intention when you're putting that. And that's a really big part of Feng Shui as well, is the intention behind things. So when you're placing that plant into your home, you're saying to your home, the environment, the universe, the plant, however you want to think about it, I'm inviting new opportunities and fresh energy into my space, so that you're infusing that live plant with that intention.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a little different.
And also there's certain things you can do.
Yeah, it's a little different with like the fake plant from IKEA that I think we've all like had during our lifetime.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny thing too is like I used to kill plants a lot. And I finally just realized, I was like, just look up a plant that's hard to kill and start with that. And then, and now I have lots of plants, that actually, once I kind of figured out on the starter plant, like you can take care of it. So I feel like there's always a solution. That's kind of the cool thing about this. Is it feels like there's an opportunity to kind of not fix everything, but there's a remedy for everything when you're looking at this. And what happens if you're in an apartment or a house or whatever kind of space, and someone comes to you and you're like, oh no, like the layout of this is really not great. So I guess what I'm saying is for things that you can't change, like the way that the whatever way your apartment building is facing or how many windows you have or whatever, how do you approach things like that?
I mean, there's rarely a home that is absolutely perfect.
Sure.
The way even building regulations are now, they're not, making sure that the front door always faces the east and, all of these things. So there's rarely a house that's absolutely perfect. So it's about finding the remedies or finding the intentional things that you can do around that space. So what you might find would be, say, your love and relationships area ended up being in your bathroom. Mm-hmm. So you might think, right, well, okay, maybe not ideal, but there's always things that you can put in place. So you could put certain crystals in there, like rose quartz. You could put things in pairs that remind you of romance, even just the togetherness, the connected. You can put certain colours into a space that will help to remedy that. So there is always something that you can do to help remedy that space. There's even, if a house isn't in a full rectangular or square, so it might mean that there would be missing areas, which is what we would class. Even if that happens, there's remedies that you can do. If you've got a garden, you can put crystals into the ground where the foundations of the house would be if it was the true shape. So there's always something that you can do, and that kind of acts like a fake boundary. So then it closes that space again, a bit like I was saying to you with thinking about it like in science when you have these circuits. You're closing those spaces all the time. You're putting those remedies in place so that then it's then actually not a challenge. So there is always something that you can do. My flat, for the last year, I was in a money lock. So that can happen. You can have a yearly money lock or even a 20-year money lock, which feels scary. But and even with that, there's things that you can do to try and help with it. So there is never. It's more finding out that maybe something like that is coming up for you, so that you can put the remedy in place without that happening. So that's more important than thinking, oh, I've got a space that's absolutely awful, because there is always something that you can do.
Right. You don't have to move necessarily,
you don't have to move.
Which is good. No. As we're talking, it's interesting. I was just thinking about like how this is an ancient Chinese practice, and it's interesting how different cultures have this, right? Like you might have
Mm,
a mezuzah up, or I grew up Catholic, and people would bury Saint Anthony statues upside down in their
upside down.
backyard, and things
Yeah.
like that. Or the hate blue color in the South is very popular on porches to keep away bad spirits and elements, and um, it almost feels like there's something inside of us, like a knowing of this,
Mm,
like that's really fascinating as I'm thinking about it and how we respond to this, regardless of your heritage and background. Um, it's interesting. And so what happens if like you're living in a space and let's say we're roommates and your element is water and my element is fire? What happens then?
what happens? Yeah. Well, so in my house, I'm a metal, and my other half, Gary, is an earth. Again, there's always ways of making it work. So one of the first things that we do within the consultation is kind of see what's happening in someone's life. One person might be really finding life challenging. Maybe the career's challenging. They can't sleep. They're having health issues. Um, we'd look at the house as a full holistic space and try and work out key areas for them. So maybe if their career was really, having a challenge, we would put certain things in place that would really support them in that space. But then we would work out another space that really supported the other person. There's lots of different things. People can be east or west people depending on the trigram that they are. And even then, you can work out a way where they can work in a synergy. So it's kind of a bit alchemic, where you're kind of, we'll put this here and we'll put that there, and that's for you and that works for you. And also we'll see what's in the space to help with that as well. So one of my dear friends is a metal like I am. She painted her whole house grey, whole house, which is really supportive for her. Not so supportive for her partner, who's a wood.
Oh, yeah.
And he would need green around him. So we just worked in elements where that could be more prevalent. So there were certain rooms that were more about more rooms that kind of supported him. So we made sure there was more green in there. There was live plants, anything that would kind of support the wood for him, so that then the space was more supportive for both of them. So yeah, there are always ways of working it out, and finding a solution. I would say that that's a lot of feng shui, is finding the solutions for people.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds really fun. Like you're putting a puzzle together, an energy puzzle, which is so cool. So you mentioned trigrams. What is a trigram?
So yes, so a personal trigram is basically your personal element. So like with the remedies that are put into place, there are the 5 elements, and within that we work out which element is specific for you. And then that will be something, it's less about your personality, although it does come in slightly, which we might go through a bit later. But it's very much about what is around you that really supports you. So it could be having certain things around you. It could be what you wear that's really supportive, what's on your bed, the kind of colours that's around you, so that your home really supports and kind of feeds you rather than depleting you. And what is the case is with each of the elements, some elements will feed and some elements will deplete. Mm-hmm. So it's understanding maybe that something depletes you a little bit. So, okay, don't wear that on the day that you're going for your interview, or have that on your bed the night before you go on holiday, or where you need to be at your top kind of Duracell battery level of I'm here. You will want those elements with you to really support you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if this is a good time to do it. Do you want to go through my trigram? Okay, let's do it.
I've worked out your trigram, and I know that when we spoke before, I was kind of thinking that you might possibly be a fire or an earth, but you're not. You're actually...
Am I plastic? Is that?
Yes.
I know it.
You're glass. you are actually a metal. So you're the same as me. Yeah,
Interesting.
which is really interesting. You're actually a hard metal, which is exactly the same as me because we're 2 days apart birthday wise.
Really?
I'm on the 26th of Jan.
Oh my
So
gosh, we're
yeah,
birthday buddies.
we're birthday buddies.
That's great.
Two Aquarians and hard metal.
Wow. Okay, so what does that
So
mean?
what does that mean for you? So metal is a very supportive element for you. When I'm saying all of this, what Feng Shui is always looking for is balance. So it doesn't mean that you wouldn't have any other elements around you. It would just mean that if you had a podcast coming up that you really, or, a job interview, or you're getting on stage, you will want some kind of metal element with you. So I've got jewelry on today.
Yeah.
That supports me and that supports you. And what feeds you as an element, so what's another really good element for you is earth. So earth is a great element for you. Having crystals around you is really supportive. Maybe, again, if you're going to go on a flight or something, take some crystals with you in your bag. You might do that already. But that will be really supportive for you. And also those colours. So any metal colour, gold, metals, really supportive for you. Whites are really supportive, greys. And also pastel colours. Pastel colours are classed as a metal, which is quite interesting. So your earphones are great.
Yeah.
They are perfect. And then colours that will deplete you, elements that will deplete you would be water and fire. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have them around you. Or, one of my friends was like, but I love swimming. And I was like, yes, good. Keep swimming. Yeah. That's amazing. It doesn't mean that, it's that. It just means that on those really important days, have the elements that really feed you. So with your bedding, a lovely cream duvet or, browns are really good, taupes, mushrooms, any kind of rock colours, that kind of stuff around you is really supportive for you. And then obviously the metal colours as well. And I think what's really fun is they do give you certain qualities as well. So with a hard metal, it's the most yang of all of the elements. So it means that you have a real natural leadership qualities. So you might find that throughout your life, you've ended up kind of being in a slightly authoritative role without having to try too hard. It's just naturally, people work with you for 2 weeks and they're like, right, you need to manage this.
Right.
And that's just something that's very natural within you. And you're really clear with communication and conversation, which when I was reading it, I was like, oh yeah, no, this is perfect for you. Like all of the stuff you're doing, I'm like, of course you're hard metal. Why didn't I think you were hard metal?
Louise, I have to tell you though, it's so funny listening back and editing these podcasts. I will say, I think I sound like an idiot half the time, like the amount of things I edit out where I'm like, yeah, so then really, okay.
I wouldn't think that at all.
So maybe I need to add more metal on me when I'm doing these podcasts. That's because I edit it out. Anyway, sorry. So
yeah, I'm really strategic. No, you're not. But yeah, no, that would be a really good one. It would help you with that clear thinking. I've put a document together for you anyway, so you can have a little look through it afterwards. But it's really interesting when you kind of go through it and you think, oh, actually, yeah, if I'm really out of sync, then I can be really overcautious. But if I'm around too much metal, I can be really overly critical or something. So it's funny when you always need that balance. And I think that's what's lovely about Feng Shui. It's very much when you're thinking about nature, it is nature. We are nature. Right. We all came from the same stardust. We're all nature. We're all, part of,
right.
That. And we, like I said to you earlier, we've kind of, in the modern world, moved away from it, and Feng Shui is kind of bringing us back to it and reminding us it's all about that balance. And, when I was talking about it and saying that my partner's Earth, that's actually the most female of all the trigrams. Ours is the most male, if you want to see it in that way, or yang, and his is the most yin. So he's Earth and he's Mother Earth. Like, if you want to think of it, whereas we are like Father Sky.
Interesting.
If you're going to see it in ancient ways. And he for many, many years would not wear jewelry, doesn't like it. It really, to him, as soon as he's near it, he needs to get rid of it. Very intuitive. And when I worked it out, I thought, well, no wonder, because metal actually depletes earth. So he could tell straight away, I can't have that metal on my person. And I just find it fascinating actually working out what people's elements are. And, you know, for him, his happy place is out in nature. And if he could take his shoes off, run around barefoot and put his hands in the mud, he'd be great. He'd love it. And it's total Mother Earth. Whereas I'm kind of the opposite, although I do love being in nature.
Sure.
But also there's some, within the personal trigrams, there are certain directions that are really good for you. Mm. So again, I'll send this over to you, but the West is really a great direction for you for prosperity and success. So when you're doing your podcast, that would be a great direction to have just behind you. So when I'm giving you the directions, always have them behind you, and imagine it's like energy coming back you and nudging you forward.
Interesting.
So the West is really good for that for you. And then the Southwest is really good for sleep. So if you can have the crown of your head facing that way. Also, as with always with Feng Shui, the Northwest is always also really good for sleep for you as well. So like I said, there's always options. So if you're with your partner and he's a fire, his directions will be totally different. But you might find that by having a couple of directions that work for you for that, you'll find a good direction for the bed, or you'd find other ways of supporting him, and you'd work out which one of you needs to sleep more or is having the most challenges with sleep, and then you'd go down that route. But yeah, I'll send this over to you.
Interesting.
So that you can go through all of the directions as well, because it's really, there's even a direction that's good for you for eating, which is the Northeast. So if you can sit that way.
I'm thinking about my house right now, and I sleep southeast, so I'll have to move over and sleep southwest and see how that works.
That works.
My typical setup for a podcast, I'm normally facing the west, so I'll need to flip it.
If you could flip it, I mean,
I want to try it.
Try it and see how you feel. Or sometimes if you're having a conversation with the bank, or maybe with me, I'm having real trouble with British Gas at the moment. So I'll always have the West behind me while I'm on that phone call, because I'm like, no, this is going to be a successful call.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what's interesting too? I do eat northwest, so close, northeast. Like I'm sort of close.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think most of us are quite intuitive. It's just trusting that.
Yes.
I think there's a real distrust, isn't there? If you think, oh, I better follow my gut, and some people are like, you should follow, the really good advice or the scientific. But actually, you have so much knowledge within you, and if you really trust that, life will go really well for you. And I think that's really important. So that's wonderful that you're pretty much there.
Yeah, it's
a slight degree.
Yeah, and something that you just said about intention. It seems like probably the more you cultivate it, which this practice would help you, the more you can just naturally flow, right? Like just naturally kind of know where you're going to get your power from, or where you need to stay away from. Do you feel like, you were really young when you started getting into this. Do you feel like you've always sort of had a natural instinct and natural connection to energy, or is it something that you've really had to cultivate?
I think there was something very natural about it when I was younger. And then I think life kind of got in the way, and you start to distrust maybe you might intuitively feel like, oh no, that's what I need to do. But then everything in society is kind of, well, no, go this way. And you think, okay. I mean, I had really bad asthma when I was younger. And so I think my mum introduced me to a certain amount of this, because I had crystal healing for my asthma. So, and it worked. It was absolutely phenomenal. I went from going into hospital quite often to having this crystal healing with this amazing lady. And again, I think I was about 10, and not having any issues. Occasionally I need to use an inhaler, but to go
Sure.
from hospitalization to an inhaler is huge, and that's
Yeah.
been in my more adult life since I've had COVID. We won't go into that.
Yeah.
So I think that I was exposed to it as well from quite a young age, and seeing that something could really work. And I think at that age as well, you don't question it.
Yeah.
You know, there's an adult doing it, so you think, oh, this must be real. This has worked, and I feel better, so it works. And it's only as you get older where some cynicism comes in, or someone has a certain feeling about something, you think, oh, maybe not. Maybe I was a bit silly there. But I don't think so. I think that energy is around us constantly. It's just that we can't see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if we could actually see it, and I do think that things are going to change slightly. There's a lot of noise, excuse the pun, about frequency. And, you know, energy coming from frequency. And I think as we progress, we're going to see more and more, and and that's going to be proven more and more. You know, they talk about frequencies with health. I don't think it's that far in the future that we're going to realize that does have a true effect. And it, you know, it's just going to show that Feng Shui does work, basically. I mean, all of the Fortune 500 businesses have pretty much had Feng Shui, and you know that's quite telling to me, because you wouldn't necessarily, a business isn't going to do it if they don't think that there's something in it. So I think that's quite interesting that you know, there's that.
It's interesting, and it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, especially when you're thinking about not only whatever your business is trying to bring in, but if you're employing people, you're dealing with a lot of personalities. Help with that in a business and in a company.
Yeah, totally. To really support them, there is a great. If you're talking about an office, I mean, God, you can feng shui yoga studios. You can even feng shui your car.
Yeah.
But within a business, there is going to be a particular space that's to do with communication that will be amazing for your marketing and your PR. And if they're in that area of your building, they're going to thrive. So it makes sense to place people where that energy is really supporting them, so that everyone thrives, because then the business thrives.
Of course.
Yeah, it's really good. I tell you something quite interesting. I've been into a couple of businesses, and walked into the CEO's office and sat down and said, "Do you feel like the business is kind of rocky at the moment?" And it's been like, "Oh, actually, yeah, you know, this hasn't gone so well." And I've looked up above them, and they've got a picture of a boat on rocky seas. And just from that intentional, it's what they're seeing every day, you know. So I think even from that perspective in your business, having the things around you intentionally that are going to help your business thrive, at the same time as working on those real elemental kind of energies that are working within your space as well. It's a marriage made in heaven kind of thing, because everything's going to thrive then. My instructor, when I was training with the Feng Shui, she'd worked with a really big Hollywood director. And this is where artwork can work, even though you might think initially, oh, I don't know if that's right. So she'd gone into his space, and he had a massive picture of a gun in this piece of artwork. And she's like, oh, okay, you know, that can kind of signify, you know, contention within the space and conflict and stuff. But what we would always do is speak to that person and say, what does that artwork say to you? And for him, it signified the first time he'd got an Oscar. So it was so joyful. It was success to him. So it was actually ended up being something that she said, don't move that. That's amazing, because his intention with it was success. So it does depend on how someone feels about, you know, what they see around them. But so far I've found ships on a rough sea, try not to have that in your space, is what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're saying that, you know, in sports, as teams are coming out of the locker room, the last thing they see is usually some sort of motivational quote or some sort of image and they touch it or whatever, like the Ted Lasso belief, right? Like,
Yeah,
and again, that sort of intuitive piece of it of like the last thing before you go on that field, what do you want to see? And it makes you really think of all the stuff that's in our space that like we probably don't think about that shouldn't
yeah,
be there.
yeah. Or is absolutely perfect, and you don't
Yeah,
realize that actually seeing that every day meant that you went for this, I don't know, new goal that you wouldn't
right.
have gone for if you hadn't have seen it. But you're right. It's about taking into consideration what you see around you, because it really does affect you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some general tips that you can give to people who are listening to this and are like, oh, I want to go in my space and look around? Like, what are some things, if there even are, that sounds so complicated in a good way, right? It's very personal and complicated, but are there any things that we can do as, listeners just going into a space and thinking, how do I maximize this, or what should I be thinking of?
There is so much that you can do, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, yes, there's the more scientific way where you do need a consultant, and
Hmm.
you couldn't do it without fully investigating the space. But there is actually so much that you can do that's just intentional and wonderful and really works. One that you can do, which is absolutely free, is open all your windows. So if that's once a week, if it's once a day, I know in the winter time it's harder, and in summer it's much easier. But by doing that, you are inviting loads of fresh energy into your space. You're letting any negative kind of stagnant energy has a space to escape. But also, while you're inviting in fresh energy, what you're doing is inviting in new opportunities, and that's kind of what we're looking for in life. Opportunities in every area. You always want an opportunity to grow. So that's what intentionally you're doing. I'm opening my windows and I'm inviting in new opportunities, and you feel better once you've done that. You'll know that once you've, I'll often open my windows because I'm in a flat, so this is safe. I wouldn't suggest this to everyone, but I'll open the windows, take my dog out for a walk, and I'll come back into the space and it feels renewed. It almost feels
Mhm.
lighter, even looking lighter. It looks less
Yes.
dark, which
Yes.
is wonderful. So that one is a big one. Open your windows. That will make a huge difference. Decluttering is a huge part of Feng Shui, mainly because clutter can hold stagnant and negative energy. So you always want kind of a flow of energy throughout your space, and that's what you'd always be creating through Feng Shui. So push your furniture away from the wall. Don't have it absolutely facing the wall. Make sure that there is space for some flow. If you imagine it's like water flowing around your space, you don't want anything that's going to dam it.
Mhm.
Um, and decluttering, it can be quite an emotional thing. So what I would say is really think about the things that are in your space. If you don't love it, and if it's not absolutely a necessity, then you don't need it in your space. And that can be quite freeing. And I think where it becomes difficult is if someone has inherited something or has been left something. And I would say the same with that, to really think about, is it bringing you joy, or every time you look at it, do you feel guilty, or do you feel let down? Or because then you're inviting that kind of vibration into your space. And what you can do is take a picture of it, and then
Yeah.
you can lovingly pass it on to someone. And what's really joyful about that is your clutter can be someone else's treasure.
Yes.
And it's such a nice way of kind of passing things on to someone else. So clutter is a really big one. And that's something that I will tackle with every single person, because let's be honest, we all have clutter.
Yeah.
My electric drawer is a nightmare. And I'll often go in and be like, what does that lead go to, and where's that even come from? So that's my little Monica cupboard, I would say, that I
Yes. Yeah.
often need to try and sort out, because otherwise I love decluttering, but then that's why I do Feng Shui.
Yes.
um, Another thing that you can do that I've actually seen a lot of people have a huge amount of success with is cleaning their oven.
Mm.
Your oven is like the health of your finances. So,
Huh.
giving your oven a good old clean every so often. And I know that's not always so easy because, let's be honest, life is hard and busy. But when you can and you clean it with the intention that you're cleaning up your finances and you're inviting new, fresh, opportunities with finances, cleaning the hobs. If you can add a mirror or glass behind your actual hobs on top, that doubles the finance as well. And keeping that really fresh as much as you can. I've had people come into money after doing it, or certain bills that they thought childcare was going to cost double the amount, but suddenly it's halved. And I even had someone where they cleaned their oven and then they went to sleep and they had a dream about how they could sort out their finances.
Wow.
So it was like that health kind of fed through to, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that the money's coming into you, but what the energy is going to allow is for you to have a way out, or a way of sorting this out, which I found really interesting because it's the health of your finances rather than just your finances. So loads of success with that one. So I would say open your windows, clean your oven, and have a little declutter when you get a moment, and just see how the energy feels with that.
Yeah. And
there's so much more though.
Oh, I bet. And everything that you said makes so much sense. And the oven is interesting because we cook in the oven and it's nourishment, and you're taking something potentially that's raw that is now healthy, that you couldn't eat before and now, is in a different form. So that's actually really fascinating that the oven is finances. And I think with decluttering, I don't know why, but I have this issue with mail and papers. And someone once said to me, and a friend of mine who's an interior designer and does organization, she was like, just put it in a bag. Put it in a bag and put it somewhere where you don't see it. And once a week or once every other week, go through it. Because if you need it, you're going to find it. Otherwise, you can probably throw it out. And when I do that, and I can actually see my kitchen counter on that, in that particular, the weight that's off of my shoulders, you literally feel it. It's like, oh, this is great. And we've all experienced that, right? It's decluttering is just like, oh, this is so great.
Freeing. It's you feel free. You do that and you feel free because you've unburdened yourself. You've absolutely unburdened yourself. And you can declutter your emails. You can decluttering your phone is wonderful. Getting rid of the photos and all the emails, all the subscriptions you signed up to. How many do you have that you never look at? Just getting rid of it all, just unburdening yourself.
And so I should get rid of the 32,385 photos I have on my phone.
Not if they bring you joy.
Who knows what's in there? I don't know. They do. Sometimes when I find something I'm looking for, they do. That's such a great idea, though. Decluttering is so many other things around us and inside of us. And I live in South Florida, so during the summer, it's funny, growing up in the summer, our house is always open. And actually, during the winter, we would keep one window cracked in the kitchen, and it was always feeling that cold air felt so good. And where I live now in the summer, you really can't. It's outrageously humid. But I do every now and then, when I do a deep clean of the house. And again, I don't know if it's from my childhood or what, but I will open the front door a couple times just to get air movement through, and then close it again and spare the air conditioning. But during our winter season is when my house is open all the time. I always have the windows open, and I leave a little window open for my cat so he can go in and out. And you feel it. You just feel that energy shift of it just feels, the word I want to use is free. You're just this is so wonderful.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. You can really feel that. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that I missed or that you want to talk about?
So. It's so vast with the feng shui, so hopefully I've answered parts of it.
Yeah.
But there's about it, and it's actually fascinating how much you can affect your life with it. I suppose one other tip I could say
Yeah.
is if anything's broken in your house. So I had a drawer that just kind of wouldn't close properly in the kitchen, and every time I came to open it, I'd feel angry, and I was like inviting this angry, just fix the drawer. Or actually, my partner's a carpenter, so he fixed the drawer.
Earth.
But
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Earth, yeah. And also, things like if you've got a burnt out bulb, get that fixed, because often that is showing you something that's going on in your life. So we had a burnt out bulb in our bathroom, and just before it burnt out, Gary and I had sat down and we were just like, we're so overwhelmed. I feel so tired. I am burnt out. And the light bulb went, and it was like the house was saying to you, yes, you are burnt out. Yeah. Fix the light and fix yourself. Go and take a break, slow down, get back to yourself, get back to that balance. And so that's what I would say as well, is to see what's happening around your house, because sometimes it will communicate with you in a way, like you were saying, where you were sending your house the letter or having the chat
Like,
with it
thank
monthly.
you. Yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sending you messages all the time as well. And I think that is wonderful, and it is trying to look after you. It is where you're safe. So I love that you do that, by the way. I wanted to say that earlier. I love that you do that. It's wonderful. A lot of people fall out of love with their homes. Something happens. It could be that, suddenly they find, I don't know, asbestos or something, right, and they get really angry with their house, or they hate the carpets. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. You can get very negative about your space, and this is a space that's looking after you,
Yes.
It's like it's your soldier looking after you every day, making sure you have sanctuary, and you have a roof over your head, and you're warm, and you have food. Right. So I think actually that's something that I've said to people is, write a letter of gratitude to your home. So I think it's wonderful that you're doing that monthly. I love that. I think that's wonderful.
It started during COVID, and, we were inside all the time. And I think it actually gave me a moment to slow down and think about, like, wow, I really love this house. Like, it's perfect for us. Like, it's the perfect size. The layout's perfect for us. I'm able to have friends over. Like, it's positioned well so that we don't get a ton of light during the day, which is actually great. So it doesn't get too hot. But there's enough light. And, it really, I didn't pay attention to it until, like you said, slowing down. And I was like, man. And again, back to sort of the quantum physics thing and how science is proving a lot of, I don't want to say ancient practices, but practices that we have that maybe aren't scientifically based originally. I remember reading an article about plants grow better when you talk to them or have music.
Absolutely.
And I just thought, I was like, why not talk to the house? Like, why not, like, what's the harm in giving thanks to the house and talking to the house? Yeah. So, and I named my plants, which anybody that knows me probably isn't surprised by that, but I do talk to my plants, and I'm like, oh, you look so great. Like, thank you so much. Oh, you're really growing, or, oh, it's time to, change out the soil or something like that. And I like to personify things, but it's funny. But again, I think there's a connection there, and it's thinking about it versus just going through the motions and putting more care and energy and attention into it.
Yeah. And how often most people are just going through the motions. Most people are wake up, go to work, come home, have some food, go to bed, and not taking that time. And you're so right. They've even done it with water, where they freeze water and they either say the really positive words to it or the negative. And even the way it freezes, when it's been the positive affirmations, it freezes beautifully in these gorgeous, crystals. And the negative, with all the negative words, it shards. It's spiky, it's angry. And that's words. I mean, words are powerful.
Words are, yeah. And the frequency thing, and I'm pointing this out, it seems silly, but I actually think is proving what you're saying. Have you seen the article about cheese that was played while it was aging? It was played hip hop, it was played like heavy metal, it was played classical, and it was the same process up until that point, and it at the end of the process tasted different. Like the frequencies changed the
Wow.
flavor
The
patterns
flavour.
with it. Yeah, and I mean,
That's
first of all, who's the
fascinating.
scientist that thought of that? That's like so
Yeah,
interesting, right? But
I love
it,
that.
you know, it's all around us, I guess is all I'm saying. It's like it's really interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I need to look that up. I didn't know that one, but yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to go away and have a look at tonight, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting.
Fascinating.
And then I want to say it's Metallica, maybe I shouldn't say, but they have a whiskey that they like it's something about like they play heavy metal in the distilling process of whiskey, and that's like part of their thing. So I don't know. It's all
There's
fascinating.
I mean, they even say it with when you're going back to elements with fire. Fire has a certain frequency, and that's why you'll feel a certain way when you're around it. It also feeds back into, you know, caveman days where fire meant safety and stuff like that. So we have certain feelings in it that are just kind of ingrained in us through evolution. But then also it has a frequency, and it has a way that it makes us feel because of the vibrations that it gives out. And that's the same as with this cheese experiment and with the
Yeah,
whiskey. Like it's all the same thing. It's just another way of showing it.
yeah,
Fascinating. Absolutely
it's really
fascinating.
interesting. Yeah. So what advice would you either give to yourself, knowing what you know now, or what advice would you give other people who might want to get into feng shui?
I I was thinking about this earlier, and I think probably just advice for my younger self. I think I would say don't focus on the destination. I spent a lot of time from being quite intuitive and thinking about the crystals and the feng shui, then getting into a certain point of my life where I felt like I had to hit all of these targets almost, and forgetting to really just enjoy and surrender to the journey. And since I've got back into that, the overwhelm has gone and things feel synchronized and life is better and more balanced. And so I would say trust the journey, I think, to my younger self, and don't rush.
Yeah, I love that. And then you talked about this a little bit, but what do you love? Well, let me ask it this way. What do you love most either about being a feng shui consultant or what do you love most about feng shui as a whole?
I think with feng shui as a whole, I love that it encourages us to bring nature back into our lives and to get back into synchronization with nature. I've said it a couple of times, but we're so disconnected. I think people are becoming more connected. I
Hmm.
think probably over the last few years, there's been more connection. You see more people talking about going and walking outside, and I have a dog, so I love being outside. Um, so I feel like I see all of the seasons now, and life feels better. And I take inspiration from the season. So, like here, it's autumn. All the leaves are in the UK. Sorry, it's autumn. All
Yes.
the leaves are falling off the trees, and I love that. I love kind of going on my dog walk and thinking, okay, well, what am I going to leave behind here? What do I need to shed? What do I not need to take into next year? So I love that about feng shui and everything else. And I love connecting with people and
Yes.
helping people to live their best lives. It's so rewarding to be able to hear that someone has had a bit of a challenge and then they've done certain things in their space and they feel enthused, and that challenge isn't even a thing they think about anymore. It's just not there. It's gone. It's really lovely, and I feel like it's a bit of a soul purpose for me, which is nice because I've spent a long time trying to get there, I think.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really amazing. And how can people find you? And also, as a consultant, do you do remote work? Like, can someone in
Mm.
Florida work with you?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's a lot of my work is actually remote. And I think, with technology, how it is now with Zoom and stuff like that, I can see people's houses even though it's across the Atlantic. So
Right.
yes, absolutely. Online and remote is a big part of the business. So yes. And then to find me, I'm blossomwithfengshui.com, and then at Blossom With Feng Shui on social media. So
Awesome.
hopefully that's easy.
It is. And I'll put it in the show notes and in all of that kind of good stuff. This was so fun. I am very excited that I know that I'm a hard metal.
Yeah.
And everything you were saying, I was like, yeah, that tracks. So this was just so interesting and so fun. And I know that I'm going to walk away from it. Like you said, tonight I'm walking to dinner and I'm going to feel the air around me and I'm going to look around and apply it to my life and really take things in more. So I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been honestly such a joy to meet with you again. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Wait, What Do You Do Again? For more information about today's guest, or if you'd like to be on the show, please visit megdeford.com. See you next time.